The Star Wars galaxy is most famous for one thing: the Force. As we know, the Force is what gives a Jedi his power. It's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us and penetrates us. It binds the galaxy together. It's the kinetic glue that holds all and keeps all in motion. And if you're lucky, and have a certain clarity of mind, you can tap into this energy, not only being compelled by it, but compel it. However, it's clear that in the Star Wars universe, the vast majority of beings can't manipulate the Force. They're not Force sensitive, as is said. And that's a very significant side note in this universe. The Force is the light in a dark world, the hope in a hopeless situation. So what of the apparent vast majority without the capability to manipulate the Force, and without the aid of someone who can? When you eliminate the Force as an element in the Star Wars universe, it quickly becomes much darker than we're used to. There's a tremendous discord between the overall lighthearted, adventurous tone of the movies and the mind-bogglingly high mortality rate in the universe perpetrated by heroes and villains alike. Sure, the world is fun and exciting when seen through Luke's eyes, but it's a hellscape when seen through the eyes of any stormtrooper or run-of-the-mill moisture farmer. And you don't have to look far to find victims of this cruel and dangerous galaxy. They're everywhere in the films, but they're always peripheral and not taken into any deeper consideration because, of course, we're focused on the Force wielders. We're focused on the hope. But I think it's important to take a look at the life and fate of those who arguably had a much more difficult time in this dangerous galaxy in order to give us a more honest look at the galaxy itself. The first characters I want to look at are three famous rebel pilots: Biggs Darklighter, Wedge Antilles, and Dak Ralter. Starting with Biggs, here's a guy who's tremendously brave and who Luke looks up to almost as his mentor before Ben. He was considered a better pilot than Luke when the two would often race on Tatooine. He also joined the rebellion and flew on several missions alongside Wedge Antilles before Luke joined, and Wedge noted his piloting skills, mentioning that Biggs probably would have had his position moving forward with the Alliance had he survived the Battle of Yavin. It's also important to note that it took Vader's legendary piloting skills to finally shoot Biggs down in the end. In his early days on Tatooine racing against Luke and bullseyeing womp rats, while Biggs was the superior racer and pilot, Luke was a better shot. There's an underlying current here that indicates the Skywalker bloodline's strong connection to the Force is the reason for their unusually precise aim. This tells us that Biggs would have been one of the best hopes for the Rebel Alliance were it not for the Force, and he probably would have gone on to take Luke's place in the squadron, seeing as he was apparently more skilled than Wedge. Wedge Antilles' survival, on the other hand, all comes down to knowing when to quit, which is a valuable skill to have in the Star Wars galaxy, especially when you're not Force sensitive. Unlike most pilots at the Battle of Yavin, Wedge backed out when things got too hot. That keen situational awareness saved his life more than once and reminds me of Dash Rendar's reasoning behind his own escape at the end of Shadows of the Empire. With the Force, you're able to go that extra mile and pull off the nigh on impossible. But without the Force, you should probably save your own skin and live to fight another day. This is represented well in the dynamic between Han and Luke. Han's been around the block and he's learned when to back out and look out for himself above all. Survival skills. Luke is naive and Force sensitive, so his outlook on life is the polar opposite, incredibly idealistic and hopeful. In fact, his outlook is only reasonable in his case because he has the capability to follow through. He has the Force on his side. Han, Wedge, Dash, they don't. And perhaps the saddest of the three pilots to me is Dak Ralter. He's the least notable, but he's always stood out to me for one single line he says to Luke in The Empire Strikes Back.
Feeling all right, sir?
Just like new, Dak. How about you?
Right now, I feel like I can take on the whole Empire myself.
I know what you mean.
I feel like I could take on the whole Empire myself. That sounds exactly like all of Luke's eagerness and boasting we heard all through A New Hope. They share the same boyish enthusiasm for adventure, which harkens back to a lot of young boys eagerly signing up during World War II, only to be met with the most hellish experience imaginable, or unimaginable. And like real life, without the strong waves of fate pushing him in a positive direction like Luke had through the Force, Dak succumbed to the dangers of warfare and was sadly lost to time. Next, I want to look at some characters from the prequels, starting with Shmi Skywalker. She's quite literally the Mother Mary of Star Wars and has a very strangely tragic role, being someone who is the embodiment of selflessness but at the same time intentionally written to be unremarkable, and is only destined to be the instrument of greatness, not greatness itself, the means of which a remarkable soul can come into the universe, but not remarkable herself. As we know, after having been freed from slavery by the Lars family, she was captured and enslaved again, only to be tortured, mutilated, and starved. becoming one of the most tragic and severe cases of victimhood in this universe. Her final moments are very stirring because on one hand it shows a tremendous amount of will and love that she clung to life only until she was able to see that her son had grown to be a strong and competent man. But on the other hand, his promise to her that he not look back in episode 1 was broken at that moment, and that moment was Anakin's first big leap into the dark side. In episode 2, we briefly see Zam Wessel, a shape-shifting Claudite that uses this innate skill to benefit, to hide in the shadows and remain anonymous. She stands out to me really only after having played Star Wars Bounty Hunter, though. The addition of her relationship with Jango in that game makes her fate so depressing and pathetic. In the game, the two form a close partnership, and it's insinuated by the end that they have feelings for each other, and may become romantically involved. So when she gets killed without a second thought by Jango, after she was scared into giving up his name, it's hard not to feel a little bad for this character who thought she could trust her partner and who was understandably using her hereditary gift in order to get by. Finally, Padme Amidala's story is one of the saddest tales in all of Star Wars. She's fierce and strong-willed, an impeccable leader and very intelligent, not giving a second thought to putting her life on the line to protect her people. But by the time we get to episode 3, when she and Anakin are disagreeing a lot politically, she's forced to almost beg and plead and try to reason with him. There's a great deleted scene from episode 3 where she calls a private meeting with her most trusted allies and they start conceiving of what will become the Rebel Alliance. She does this behind Anakin's back because she knows at this point she can't reason with him. A very difficult spot for someone to be in, but she always stuck to what she believed in no matter how hard things got. And I'm sorry that I didn't include this scene because I think it's a testament to how strong and capable she really is. Not just in a lightsaber wielding, guns blazing kind of way, although she has no trouble doing that sort of thing if need be. And I chose to discuss Padme last because she became the victim of not only just a Force user in the end, but her life partner. The person who was supposed to be the closest to her. And like Shmi, she would become the vessel of heroes that could fight the battles she could not. It's arguably more courageous to stand up for yourself and those around you when you're vulnerable. Sure, a Jedi can resolve a dispute because their mere presence will strike fear into all parties involved. But when a regular person dives headfirst into danger, and in the case of Star Wars, when someone without Force abilities sticks their neck out for those around them and for what they think is best, that's a hero. To be vulnerable and to stand up for what's right anyway, that takes courage. Padme was a woman who fought for what was right when all odds were continuously against her, and she lost everything in the end. But if we include the deleted scene, she planted the very first seed of rebellion, and of course she birthed Luke and Leia. And I think it's beautiful that at the very end of Padme's life, a woman who fought for all that's good and lost everything, she unknowingly gave the universe the tools to finally defeat the evil she'd been helplessly fighting all her life. Those without Force powers are often victims of circumstance, but sometimes those without Force powers are Star Wars' greatest heroes.